Hello, welcome to the podcast. My next guest is Colin Keegan, another UK worker bee who has lived in America for the past 27 years. Colin founded the Santa Fe Spirits Distillery in 2010 after living on an apple orchard that led to making apple juice, then apple brandy. Since then, he has expanded to malt whiskey, liquor, gin, and vodka. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, the distillery also began producing hand sanitizer. Santa Fe Spirits was profiled by the Whiskey Wash as one of 7 whiskey distilleries that define the West. This is also a time capsule episode where we consider theories of time. And who better to ask than a chap making proper whiskey in Santa Fe? I'm in Connecticut. It's about 5 p.m. here and 3 p.m. for Colin in the southwestern climate. This is our first whiskey distillery on the show, and I'd be very happy to continue this trend from Connecticut to Scotland because the history is as good as the drinks. Very excited that Colin is joining us today. Let's bring him out. Hey, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Well,
Terrific. All right, great to see you, man. Thanks for doing this.
and likewise, thanks for having me.
All right. So how's it going out there? How's the day treating you? What's the weather like?
It's been a good week. Since sort of we could see the end of COVID as a small business guy, you have some weeks when you get setbacks and some weeks when you seem to be stepping forward. This was a week of stepping forward, which was good for us, It was,
Absolutely.
Just calling us and asking for more product and, our tasting rooms getting a chance to open and things like that. So it was good.
Yeah, I'm very excited to learn about the tasting room. You've got a great story here. So let's start with your origin story, so to speak. Take us from living in Britain to your first year running the Santa Fe Spirits Distillery.
Oh goodness, I'll try and keep it short because that's a big gap.
I know.
So I left Britain as a young architect when the economy tanked. So the economy changing has been a stimulus for me to go do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And that was in 1991 into 92. There was a dip in a need for architects anyway.
Wow.
Said, blow it all, I'm going to go join my younger brother in the British Virgin Islands and become a beach bum. And it was the first career I really failed at because I'm very linear. I like to stay busy. So we delivered some boats and hung out in the Caribbean for a bit and met my wife, and who had a 1-year-old daughter at the time. And I ended up with one of my most stressful jobs, working for New York clients, designing a building and a Caribbean work crew. So from, can we have it built in will you build it in 8 months, to we think as a Caribbean work crew, we can do it in 3 years. I was a mid-20 something architect trying to pull the two together. So after a few years of that, my wife and I decided, decided we're going to leave, and I wanted to explore the US. I'd never actually been, and decided I'm going to go see what it's about. My daughter was now 3. We started thinking for schools. My wife was an artist and wanted to get back into it. She was a sailboat captain when I met her.
Okay.
I actually learned to sail on her boat, and she was the captain. So she's still the captain. She's still the captain.
She's the captain. I get it. I hear you, man.
I'm smart enough to know that. Yeah. So yeah, we dived in and moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, because her parents grew up here way back in the 1930s, and her family had a history here. Anyway, sort of fell in love with Santa Fe in a weird way, in that it's not really it definitely wasn't then mainland US, very slow pace, a bit removed from normalcy, which we liked, and a great artist community for my wife. And I really sort of hung out for a bit, got back into my skiing and things like that, and then trained a bit more under some other architects to get reciprocity for my degree over from England, and architected for 15 or so years, a long time, and ended up designing a house in an apple orchard in a little town called Tsuke, just 4 miles north of Santa Fe, in a little valley that's got a river in it, and multiple apple orchards actually. So I, messed around in the apple orchard, was making apple juice with friends one year in the fall, and then picking more apples and more people. We ended up with 60 or 80 people. It was kind of fun to run the press, but we ended up doing about 500 gallons of apple juice in a weekend. You can only drink so much, especially without the preservatives. It kind of tends to, go straight through you, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so I fermented some into hard cider. And after 2 or 3 years of this, because I really wasn't drinking it that fast, my wife said, I can't get my car in the garage. Do something with all this hard cider. So when it's fermented, it has enough alcohol in it for you to be able to distill it. And I, to be honest, got a book out and read how to distill, and realized that 50 gallons of apple hard cider will make 5 gallons of apple brandy. So I had, 500 gallons, and I ended up with 50 of adequate, I'll be polite to myself, adequate apple brandy. So I started aging it in casks, and people said, oh, this is quite nice. I'll buy a bottle. And at which point the economy had tanked, and I said, well, I need a hobby. Maybe I'll just set up a shingle and sell a few bottles. But that's when I realized I was a moonshiner, because it's illegal to distill even for yourself. And I thought,
I didn't know even for yourself it was illegal.
Even for yourself, you can ferment, which is wine growing, and beer making, which is fermentation. But distilling is illegal even for yourself.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Which is there's a couple of reasons. One is it's high proof alcohol, and it can explode. I mean, you've got to be really dumb to be able to explode high proof alcohol. But and secondly, it you can do yourself some damage, with liquor as opposed to wine and beer. That was the premise of it. Really, it's more about taxes, but that's another long conversation. But so anyway, I was doing this, and I decided it's a good time to buy a building, because nobody was buying real estate, and I bought a building, bought a still, and my plan was 5 days a week. It would be a hobby, one day I'd market, one day I'd do sales, one day I'd distill, another day I'd catch up and offer stuff, and then I'd goof off skiing and stuff. That never happened.
Yeah.
So that was in 2010, very early. So the first year of running it, to sort of round out the story, was hiring a distiller, a business manager, an office manager, and a bartender to run the tasting room. So we were already at 4 people, and we were realizing that the 3,000 square feet I bought wasn't enough. And they were condoed units in an industrial area where we were. So I bought the connected unit. We expanded into there about a year later. And I've always treated it a bit more like architecture, sort of project by project. The current project's building the distillery. The next project is figuring out how to make whiskey. The next project is figuring out how to sell the whiskey. I mean, bottles and labels and marketing and sales and stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that was really the first year, and met some great folks in the industry and as staff members. But, it's a brewing and distilling industry, so they move on. None of those guys are with us anymore. I mean, they're still around, obviously, but they're not in the Santa Fe Spirits. They've moved on. We trained a lot of distillers and a lot of bartenders in craft spirits.
Wow, terrific. Is that a black tea there, or what?
That's just regular old English breakfast black tea.
I gotta cut myself, man.
yeah, good for you. Yeah, it's 3:20 in the afternoon. It's tea time.
It's definitely tea time, absolutely.
Yes.
As was 11 a.m. and 12:30 before that.
Oh, you're a tea drinker. I like it. That's good.
Yeah, I'm trying, man. It was funny. We were talking about this beforehand. He said it would be good to talk about the motherland, and you're like, yeah, definitely.
Yes, yes. Comes in
So,
everywhere.
so where are you right now? Are you at the orchard at home, or?
I am at home, actually. I'm in one of the upstairs rooms, hence the pitch roof, and here in the orchard.
That's
I
true.
might give you vertigo, but I can go show you out the window if you like.
Yeah, how about at the end we'll go take a
Yeah,
look.
yeah, we
Or
can do that. Yeah,
yeah. All right, yeah, it'll be a teaser. So uh
yeah.
and if people are really curious, you can hop over to the end and and see the showing, and then double back here. All right, so I got some fun questions here. Right, so we talked about your first year, and you talked about being a bit of a moonshiner. So I'm going to bump this question up here.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm listening.
how far along were you in terms of distribution before you finally got all the paperwork done? If you
Um,
can say.
yeah. I mean, to be honest, as soon as I actually realized I wanted to make this happen, I joked that I was a moonshiner. I'd given bottles away to buddies. I hadn't really actually sold anything.
Oh
And
yeah,
that's what the government are really concerned about, is avoiding taxes. I mean, a whole massive part of our industry, which used to be highly taxed, and I would maybe talk about that if we get time later on,
mhm.
it's not as badly taxed now.
Wow.
Um, the government their goal is to protect the taxes and then the public, in that order. That's their mandate, believe it or
Wow.
not. Um, so you actually have to apply for a federal license, a state license, and a city and county operating license. And the biggest problem is that with distilleries, it's not like opening a grocery store. There's lots of them, and they know the rules and regulations. When I opened, I was the second one in New Mexico, and they said, well, we can't really remember how this happened. A guy opened one 8 years ago. Go and ask him what the rules and regulations are.
Hmm.
So I knocked on the door of my competition and said, I'm in competition with you. Can you tell me how to do it? And he wasn't the most receptive. Generally, it's a very friendly industry. He wasn't particularly, that was just, he wasn't fussed on having competition because he'd been the only guy around.
Sure.
But he tried to run them, as you might say, in series, apply for the federal and the state at the same time. And
Uh-huh.
it actually worked to our benefit. It took 9 months.
Okay.
And nowadays, we have paved the way. I hear people in New Mexico getting them in 2 to 4 months because they actually know what a distillery looks like, what it walks and talks like. On the federal level, it's just slow, but they know exactly what they're talking about because they've got a very good system for collecting taxes. So you pay federal taxes to the federal government. Excise tax in New Mexico is paid by the distributor,
Right.
and then gross receipts tax is paid by the public.
Right.
There's somebody going into a liquor store and buying a bottle. So distribution didn't actually start till year 2, and we signed up with. Well, actually, they knocked on our door and said, "Oh, we heard about you guys. We want to be a distributor," and that was Republic National. And for those in the industry, that's the second biggest distributor in the country. So we were floored. We thought this was great.
Yeah.
And we signed up, and they were good guys, except it didn't dawn on us. And I'll be honest, maybe I'm slow. It took me 2 or 3 years to realize 90% of their efforts goes into their top 10 accounts, which would be Jack Daniels and Smirnoff,
Right.
so that the public
Right.
know who we're talking about. I mean, they're Diageo and Pernod Ricard,
Sure.
companies behind those. They have to, and I've sort of learned that myself. I focus on my big distributors more than I do my small ones because it's where the money comes from.
Right.
So we were so tiny, we really couldn't get much attention,
Mm.
and we couldn't afford to pay for the attention.
Hmm.
You don't put money in people's pockets, but you do pay in big discounts on bottles. An example might be it costs you $5 to make vodka. You sell it at $10 to the distributor. They sell it at $15 to the liquor store. who sells it at 20.
Right.
And then they say, well, to get this really selling, let's do $5 discount on it. So they ask you for the discount. So you make it for 5 and you sell it at 10, and they want you to give them 5 back for every bottle they sell.
Right.
So that they will keep you on the shelf. And that's the distribution game. If you're a big guy, Smirnoff, and you just come out with, peanut butter flavored vodka, you do that. They don't make a penny on that for like a decade. The distributor makes a lot of money, and the retailer makes a lot of money. And if it takes off, eventually it rolls back, and you say, right, no more discounts, and it's not $20 anymore. Now it's 30, and you make money. But you've got to be able to suck it up for years to do that. And as a small business, you can't,
right?
Because you're buying buildings and paying people, and all that stuff.
Right. So, so how did you handle it? Really, you talked about learning how to sell whiskey. What were some of your early tricks? Do you mind sharing, or make me curious?
No, not at all. If anybody's thinking of setting up a distillery, the biggest trick is figure out how to sell it first. If you come at it from an idealist, I'll make great whiskey and then I'll figure out how to sell it, you'll be like us. You'll be a decade in and figuring out, maybe we've got a bit of an edge now, because we're the old dog and people like that,
Right.
The better way to do it would be to come at it from, this is how I'm going to sell this. Is it tennis shoes, go-karts, or whiskey? I don't care. This is how I'm going to sell it.
Yeah.
And then go backwards. Because that's how the industry's built. I mean, it's not a complaint. It's just is the way it is. So what it does is it gives you an angle as an idealist that people who find you love what you're doing. And, those are the people that walk out with 4 bottles of whiskey. I mean, you think of 4 bottles of whiskey, that's a lot of liquor. But they love the story, so they buy one of everything you make.
Right.
As opposed to, well, I buy a bottle of Jack Daniels every month and it lasts me, my friends and all the rest of it.
Right.
So it's different, and tasting rooms are a great bonus to us, and are to all distilleries really. It's very good income, because you don't have them typically in most states. You don't have a distributor taking a big margin, and you don't also have to pay all kinds of other expenses to get it to retailers and bill backs and stuff.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue, actually.
People have been to your tasting, they will remember that. Oh, good.
No, my very next question was actually, you have a variety of different spirits. How do you structure a tasting? Usually whiskey first, I mentioned in the intro, you've got a liqueur, you've got your apple brandy, of course, you've got gin, vodka, and I believe 4 different blends of single malt.
Yeah, actually, I got all the single malts here just so I could have visual aids. But
great, thank you, awesome.
We'll wait for that in a minute, and I need to get you a bottle so you can see what we're talking about, but that's later. But
Cheers,
when we do a tasting, it depends on who we're talking to. If a whiskey club comes in, we don't bother with the vodkas and the gins and everything like that. We run through our line of whiskeys. We've got 9 products, so each one goes in a little shot glass. Typically, when we get to the whiskeys, we do proper, and I brought this visual aid, the Glencairn glasses you've seen.
All right.
The best way to drink whiskey is the nicely shaped glass, the funnel that will actually help accentuate the flavors, like a good wine glass. But if you come to our distillery, we'll give you a tour where we talk really about how to make whiskey, because it's more complex than the other items we make. Then you'll go into the tasting room and we start with the vodka. We don't make our vodka from scratch, so we pass by that really quickly. We buy it. Our distributor says we should have it, and our tasting rooms, no matter how much of a craft distiller you are, you still sell a lot of Moscow Mules, which is just vodka and ginger.
I'm a sucker for Moscow Mules, actually.
Oh yeah, well,
you caught me.
I think everybody is. It goes down so easily,
Yeah, they're great. What can you even
say? And they're typically more affordable as well.
That's true. Yeah. I didn't think about that.
So we'll talk. Yeah, and there's a reason why you see them front and center, because even a $8 Moscow Mule is a lot more profit for a bar than a
Mm.
$15 whiskey drink,
Yeah, of course.
because they're buying the product at $1. I know they've got overhead, like we all have, and they're selling it at $8. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, tasting. Sorry, off subject. So we'll look at vodka. What we do is go through the clear spirits
Mm-hmm.
and then into the whiskeys, because the whiskeys have a longer finish on them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go from whiskey to gin to vodka to brandy to whiskey again, you're going to get
Right.
very mixed up. So we'll go through vodka, our gin. We do an unaged whiskey, Silver Coyote, moonshine
Yeah.
to some people, but it's made from 100% malted barley, so it's a nice product. Not designed to rip your face off like some moonshines, but it's a good blender. We call it a monotone whiskey. It's just malted barley. That's all it is.
Mm.
We then go into our whiskey lineup. Sorry, no. Then we do our brandy, this is our apple brandy here,
Right.
which is from the orchard we're in at the moment. You can see it's got a nice dark color on it. Oh, I must have had a nip a little bit before that. Oh, it's not a full bottle.
Got you. That's
Caught me,
funny.
busted. Yeah.
Busted.
Busted. So that is a brown spirit, so it's got a longer finish on it. And now you can start in our tasting talking about the nuances of what oak does, how it finishes, why you add water to brown spirits,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. Then we go into our whiskey lineup, this is our flagship, the orange label Keegan Mesquite Smoked Single Malt.
Right.
Then we go to one that is the apple brandy cask finish from the casks that this brandy's just come out of. The regular Keegan's a 3-year. This is a 4-year. That's the minimum.
Right.
Then we go to a single cask release, which is a cask strength. The regular whiskey's 92. This is 118.
Wow.
It'll blow your skirt up a little bit, so to speak. And this is actually you can see by the label at the top here, a 10-year anniversary, which is the whiskey's not 10 years old. It's about 5 years old.
Right.
But it's to celebrate 10 years in business, and we brought it out last year. And this one is finished in Pedro Jimenez sherry butts. So It's very interesting. What you need to do when finishing is you charge them. So you pour a lot of sherry back in and swill it around, tip out the oak chips, but there's still sherry in there.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to waste it by pouring it, but you can even see a darker color in the whiskey there.
I hear you. Yeah, that's terrific. Yeah, I know a bit. I know a bit. I've like experimented with palette and stuff like that, but and learned about how real color is made, through aging in barrels. There's always more to learn though. I actually did I spotted that Keegan PX for your 10-year anniversary on the website. And I'm going to quote you here. Keegan PX presents ripe plums and tree fruits, musty oak, leather, walnut, molasses, and candied ginger on the nose, with baked apples, caramel, and dried fruits on the palate, with a subtle wood smoke on the finish to celebrate your 10-year anniversary at Santa Fe Spirits.
Yeah.
How did you How did you start designing for your 10-year anniversary bottle? What ideas came first,
We know we wanted to do something different, but really weren't geared up. And it takes years if you really want to make a whole different whiskey, like a bourbon or a rye or something, So we kept it in line with product we already had aging, which is called Keegan whiskey. Everything goes in really sort of like the cask strength. We put it in at about 120 proof and age it. And the casks do different things. So for the 10-year anniversary, we had been surprised because we thought our apple brandy cask finish, which is a finish on a whiskey, would do well, but they did very well. Enough so that we sold out in the first year and had to sort of take more product and put it in apple brandy casks and age it. It gets an extra year of aging. and it was still selling well, which is great.
Yeah.
So we thought that might be a good thing because we wanted to sell it as well, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I am really a sucker now for a lot of the scotches that are aged in different casks. You know, I'm in my mid 50s now, and since I would say mid late 30s, I was drinking the super smoky scotches for a long time. And then I got so burnt out, haha, on that. And then I moved away from the smoky ones into the sort of more softer ones, you know, the Balvenis and the Dalwhinnies and things like that. And
Yeah.
Scotland, or I say Scotland, single malts generally, not scotches, but single malts, and we can talk about the difference later.
Mm-hmm.
Single malts to me have a lot more range than bourbons. I love bourbon. I think it's a great product, but they've got such tight restrictions with their 51% corn, minimum 2-year age, and
Right.
always new oak, that there's not too many other parameters that you can still call it bourbon. Now, a lot of them are branched out into finished bourbons and et cetera, et cetera. But single malts have a wider variety of what you can do.
Uh-huh.
And so we decided to stretch that into a Pedro Jimenez finish.
Right.
Wonderful sherry, great history, really nice oak casks that weren't going to give us any trouble as well. They were high quality. We talked to the broker for those. So it all came together. When you apply for a label, you have to, with the Taxation and Trade Bureau, you have to have the fanciful name, who makes it, which is actually here, Santa Fe Spirits, the fanciful name, what
Yeah.
it is, the proof and everything. So to be
Right.
honest, we weren't being lazy, but we wanted to be expeditious, let's put it that way.
Oh yeah.
We stuck with the same format that we already had. And the
Right.
things we changed are the things we could easily, which was the color. We could actually add on here 10-year anniversary. We couldn't put 10-year on the front and anniversary on the back because that would be implying it was 10 years. We're really not trying to fool anybody. And that's what a lot of labeling in liquor is about, is being as truthful as you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, my description of, you know, plums and oak and musty oak and things like that is allowed in this band because the Taxation and Trade Bureau know that you can more or less write whatever you want in here. You can't put in here, you know, will cure cancer, will do anything.
Yeah.
You can't lie on there, but you get to be expansive, you know. If I say it tastes like plums, it's because that's what I taste. You might not taste it. You
Right.
might taste raisins, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I worked at a liquor store at one point, and you start saying stuff like earthy
Yes.
tones and like
Yeah.
sometimes it's just like what?
Yeah.
But let's get into the labels, the
Yeah.
titles, because I think that's probably suckered many a guy into the business, is coming up with these fun names
Yes.
for a good drink. So I noticed, yeah, you have your version of moonshine, what is called White Dog
Yeah.
whiskey. You called it Silver Coyote. Great choice for New Mexico. Were
Yes.
you having a tough time choosing the name, or did you just know it was Silver Coyote?
Um, that one came a little easier
Mhm.
because we knew we were going to sell whiskey, and like I say, our flagships, the aged whiskey. But
Mhm.
we really wanted to sort of test. To be honest, it wasn't as much about income as it was trying to figure out distribution. How does this work? Let's test it on a whiskey, but we don't have one made. Let's
Mhm.
do a white dog. Okay, white dog. Okay, well, you know, in New Mexico we have a lot of coyotes, so closest thing in New Mexico to a white dog is a silver coyote.
All right. Right on.
But every name is difficult. Because you can actually, there's a website, just Google in, you know, trademarks and names. We actually pay an attorney every time we think of a name. We can check online first, and then he can do a deeper dive on a search. Um,
Wow.
Unbeknownst to us, and it really wasn't meant as any insult, a silver coyote is a spirit animal for the Native Americans. Of course, we have a lot in New Mexico. So
Wow.
we you know, ruffled a couple of feathers. Nobody asked us to change it. We'll get to changing names by force later. That's an interesting story. But
Wow.
they somebody said, well, you know, you're not going to sell any to the sort of the Native American population here, because it's a spirit animal, and it's not that they have commandeered those words for themselves. It's that to them it means something completely different, which is not a good thing necessarily.
Right.
Elsewhere, it does fine for us. It's a single monotone whiskey. Again, in naming things, it's amazing how things come back to bite you. Because it's called Silver Coyote, I don't have a bottle here with me, and because it's got barbed wire on the label, and because it's clear and it's in a bottle, and
Right.
it's made in New Mexico, not Mexico, but New Mexico,
Right.
everybody thinks it's tequila until they taste it.
Ah.
Oh, you make a tequila? Well, that again is another government issue. That's for another long haul talk. You can't make tequila in America. It has to be made in Jalisco, Mexico, like champagne has to come from France.
Wow. I would love to have you back to talk about that. That would be
Oh
very
yeah, that's another whole genre.
that would be extremely
Yeah,
interesting to get into. That would be great.
yeah,
Absolutely. All right. So there's so many ways to go from there.
yeah.
Thank goodness I wrote some of these down. So I might be pronouncing this wrong, but on the website it says you produce a Calvados apple brandy.
Yeah.
What is a Calvados apple brandy, and how has your brewing process developed for the brandy over time?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, there's many parts to that answer. This is the Calvados style apple brandy. We just call it apple brandy. That's another thing. You can't make Calvados unless it's made in France.
Ah,
It's an appellation denomination, I think is the term they use. Um, so we say you can say Calvados style, which is what we do, but really this is, I'll show you apple brandy there. It's not a very fanciful name, but it's actually called Santa Fe apple brandy because Santa Fe is written up here.
yeah,
And it's made with Mountain West apples because my orchard, you'll see if we did a very quick view of it later,
yeah.
is only 4 acres. And here in New Mexico, we've got it's 65 degrees outside at the moment. So the trees are going to start blooming soon. And a lot of times in April, we'll get a storm that will kill all the blossom. So it will actually stop the apples growing. So we have to go somewhere we know can always do it. Funnily enough, Southern Colorado is, they heat their orchards, basically. They have
Right.
fans that blow warm air through them. So we can go there. That's why it's got that descriptor on it. But to the Calvados, what Calvados means actually, the style of brandy is it has to be made from apples and there's no sugar to be added. Those are
Mm,
really the two delineators. An extra add-on is it used to be a double distillation. We found out from some of our favorite, because we had to test everything, of course. Calvadi, if that's the plural, I don't know what a plural of Calvados is, were actually done in a single distillation. So when you ask about, how it changed, we used to do the classic stripping run, strip out all the alcohol and all the flavor and
yeah.
some alcohol and flavor that you don't want. But within 4 hours, you can do that. And you can do it twice in a day.
Right.
To the second run, which is when you separate out the heads, the hearts, and the tails, whereas the
Oh, wow.
hearts stay with you. The heads are the methanol and butanol, nail polish remover to most people. That's waste product. We use it as a cleaning fluid. It's only a
Right.
small amount that comes off the top. That's the heads. The tails are where the fusel oils and the congeners and stuff gather. And it's sort of a funkier taste. So we get rid of those too. I actually go straight down the drain. It's too oily to clean with. But the sweet apple brandy that's left in the middle
Right.
is a Calvados style. We don't add any sugar. We just take that straight off the still and put it straight into casks. What we do actually when you're distilling, you end up with very high proof alcohol first, methanol and butanol. They're
Okay.
called low. Well, actually, that's a long story. That's another time.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
we gather about 300 gallons at a time, and it homogenizes what's come off the still after multiple distillations, so that we
right.
know that whole batch of 6 casks is all going to be exactly the same.
Wow. Terrific.
Mhm.
So it's You said it's not sweetened, so it's just totally apples fermented and then distilled.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
Jonathan Gala Golden Delicious apples, which are the heirloom varietals that are in my orchard. I say heirloom. Jonathan and Gala are more heirloom varietals. Golden Delicious, I have our Golden Delicious trees here, but they're
Wow.
really more about adding bricks to it, which is sugar, basically.
Right.
Bricks, which then converts to more alcohol, so you can get a better yield.
Right. And the heirloom is 100-year strain, right? So,
Ours is about 80 years strain. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
All right. Terrific. Thanks
yeah,
so much for that. That was great.
yeah.
We talked about this in the prep. This is a time capsule episode where we consider theories of time. Pretty
Oh
cool
yes.
that your game, especially since we're talking about aged whiskey here. But for starters, I was actually curious, your own deep down thoughts about time. Like, you see a movie about time travel with your
Yeah,
friends, you leave, you start talking about time, those types of
yeah.
talks. Like, do you have any thoughts like that, or mostly just as they apply to whiskey?
No, you know, I'm old enough so I don't get embarrassed. Some people get embarrassed about this, but in a town like Santa Fe, there's a lot of meditation that goes on. And meditation is really about being in the present moment, not trying to think about the future, where you're going, or the past, where you've been, just be in the present. So it's sort of trying to remove time from the equation of focusing on being centered. Um, However, doing that, you're sort of trying to clear your mind and not go anywhere in particular. My mind will drift, and it starts me wondering about, you can recreate scenes in your mind about where was I? There's some scenes, everybody's got them as a kid.
Yeah.
You just remember that vividly, but you can't remember 2 years either side of it. Why do you remember that one incident?
Wow.
Something triggered as a growth or a synapse connecting for me that just ding, and it sticks with you. And
Yeah.
you've got those through your life. Your wife will tell you, when was our anniversary? I don't know. You're supposed to remember that. Doesn't necessarily mean that your wedding day was the big thing that happened. And that's not so much time, really. It's just how the brain connects. But when you really think of time, it's a very bizarre concept.
Yeah.
There's nothing
Yeah.
I love more than sitting, just watching my cat. And they'll sit for an hour and watch my cat in particular in our orchard, a gopher hole, waiting for a gopher to come.
Yeah.
There's no checking their watch. There's
No.
no, and time just goes. And then you'll watch your cat chasing a mouse, and it's frantic. And you put two mice in a room. Not that I would tease our cat that much. Okay, I've done it. So two mice in, and which way the cat goes, and it's got to catch both at the same time, And
Oh boy.
so for time, for me, it's relative to sort of how the day goes. You know,
Yeah. Wow.
um, in the whiskey, it's funny. We're waiting for a 3-year-old product to age. And every day I go to work, it's 3 years. It seems frantic to me.
Right.
Somebody's knocking at the door because they've got a pickup for our distributor.
Right.
The fire marshal's going to come and check on something. I've got to get an email out. I'm talking to some investors, and 8 hours is gone.
Right.
And then suddenly, gosh, we're a 2-year-old company. Where did that time go? So for me, it's sort of relative as to how I get through the day. The meditation for me sort of brings me back to not much you can do about it. It keeps you checking, and you keep getting gray hair.
Yeah. Wow. So how often do you meditate?
Once a day, just a 10-minute morning meditation.
All right.
And
Good for you. Good to know.
now, yeah, to be honest, I think, and I'm not going to say everybody should run out and meditate. For me, it's my 10 minutes for myself. A lot of
Mm,
people find themselves running around, keeping a lot of other people around them happy. And
yes.
I would be one of those. And I've got to return his phone call. I can't be mean. And there's somebody at the door. I've got to get there quickly. This is like, nope, 10 minutes. It's silence, and it's not silence sleeping. You're actually trying to focus just on being there, and I find it
Yeah.
very grounding for me, anyway.
Yeah. I kind of like the way you phrased that. I can't be mean. It
Yeah,
it's tough.
yeah,
Sometimes things are stressful, and you know um, everybody does slip. It's quite true.
yeah,
But
definitely.
so these time moments, your ding moments, can you
Yeah.
share one? You don't have to dig deep. It could be harmless, just one that that came up.
Um, well, I don't know. This does really relate back to England. If anybody's ever seen Doctor Who, I don't know if anybody remembers that weird series from
No, there's
England.
definitely some Doctor Who fans in
Yeah, there's some
America.
Doctor Who fans there. Anyway, they had these Daleks, which were these sort of cone-shaped aliens.
Uh,
And for years, I remember we were in Cyprus actually. My dad was in the Royal Air Force, so we travelled around
oh
Forces
wow,
Brat, and they had these windmills in Cyprus, which was between Greece and Turkey. Is the tiny little island that since then has been bombed to oblivion, unfortunately. But
wow,
when he was in the Royal Air Force, he was a kid, and we always used to drive past this. To me, what looked like a Dalek, which was, I mean, I was 6. I shouldn't have been watching scary TV at that age, but I blame my parents. But this cone thing, maybe, and of course, it's not human size. It's a building.
right.
And it was actually a windmill. And I remember a couple of years later, sort of comprehending how windmills worked and realizing this was just a windmill. The blades are blown off, and it was one of those aha moments. And one of those moments, even as a young kid, I realized I wasn't smart enough 2 years ago to know what this is. Now I'm smart enough.
Right.
And maybe that's where some synapses in my brain connected. And that's why it stuck with me. But that's 49 years ago.
Yeah, wow.
Actually, no, I was 8. Yeah, I was about 8 by the time I realized it. 43 years ago or something. And yeah, why do those moments pop up when
Yeah, wow.
I think the day-to-day mundane going to and from work, you can see why people don't remember that. But there are occasions why things really, everybody remembers that where they were when Kennedy was shot. Well, I don't because I wasn't on the planet, and you weren't either. But I mean, well, okay, 9/11 is one. I think there was a lot of shock and awe and horror at that for many, many reasons. And that's why it sticks in a lot of people's mind. I remember being, when we were building this house, actually, on a construction site, when I realized what was happening.
Yeah.
And from then till now, we've sort of forgotten what it was all about, but we sort of haven't as well. And there's a big time factor in there. I mean, we're coming up for 20 years on that, believe it or not.
Wow.
And it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it just
Wow.
makes me pause and wonder.
Sure. That was really something, man. I'm glad you shared all that. Actually, I was in another country at one point, and I don't know why I I got very lucky with my study abroad program. I got to go to Fiji,
Oh, cool.
which at one point was part of the British Empire, and
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of lore there. But someone from Fiji once actually asked me um, just about 9/11, like what it was like. And
Yeah.
not that I was close to it, I was in Connecticut, but
Hmm.
the notion of having to explain like this like seismic event, like here everyone has their own story, and to explain that to
Yeah.
someone else, like I'd never even thought that way before. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that was really something.
Oh, cool.
So, and then how about we were gonna maybe talk a little bit about how age and like the time in aging, and also the New Mexico climate affects your creation of these
Yeah.
drinks.
Yeah. Well, I said earlier, our whiskies are a minimum. You there? I thought I froze for a second
Yeah, a
there.
little bit of a freeze. It's all
um,
good.
that's it's all good.
Yeah.
So it's funny when you talk about time. For us, a lot of manufacturing is based around just-in-time production. Oh, are you there?
I'm here. Sorry
Oh
about
yeah,
that.
sorry. I thought I hit the computer
May-
touchpad.
Maybe I'm
Um,
just I'm sitting super still.
Sitting super still. I'm that interesting, not really. But so we have times where you have to pitch the yeast within a 5-minute window of the hot water going into the still. Otherwise, you've got to climb into a different part of the still. I mean, the fermentation tanks. You have
Right.
to wait 20 minutes sorry, an hour for the laudering to happen, for the yeast to, not the yeast, sorry, the enzymes in the barley to break it down. Lots of small little time gaps. And you sort of run through all of these, and we've got it down to a science now, which is great. But you run around crazy for a couple of days making it, and then a few more days distilling it. And then you've got to get it into casks as quick as you can so it can have extra days aging. Then you let go and you sit back and wait for 3 years,
Yeah, wow.
But here in New Mexico, 3 years isn't an old whiskey. That's why we don't even put it on a label, because it's not impressive. Now, if you go across to Scotland, they don't even talk about 3-year whiskies, unless it's what they call new make. They start, some of them are 8, but they really start, if they're doing single malts, that is. Blends are a whole just category into themselves. Another podcast, there you go. Blends are a different one altogether. But so, it takes sort of 12 years to really get not a same flavor profile. We think our flavor profile after 3 years is good to sell. And people agree with us, like distributors and liquor stores and bartenders and etc. And we have awards and write-ups that say the same thing. So we think we're onto something. And what happens is you put the whiskey into a cask at about between 120 and 125 proof for us. That's what we put it in at.
Right.
And that very high octane, so to speak, in the alcohol pulls the flavors out of the cask. And it's very powerful at that level, but the higher, more volatile alcohols escape first. Luckily for us, that's the sharper stuff that you really don't want. You want a smooth whiskey. You don't want people to say, oh, it doesn't burn as much as the last batch. That's not good for whiskey.
Right.
But you do want them to say, oh, that is smooth. You can say heat. Heat is not a bad thing, but burn is not, for us, a good thing. We're not in the moonshine category where we're, pounding Fireball or something,
Yeah.
But so in 3 years, the reason it happens quicker in New Mexico is because we've got very little humidity. And it's not, well, partly because we get like 4 to 6 inches of rain a year here. We don't get much. That includes all our snowfall, which is, more snow, but it ends up as less water. So we don't 7,000 feet. So the air is thinner up here. So whatever humidity is can disappear a lot quicker. It's very dry here.
Right. You skipped a little bit there. You said something 7,000 feet.
Oh, we're at 7,000 feet in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Right.
So when you put it into a cask is a bunch of, wooden staves, long wooden pieces, and they all tighten together in a cask that's round. If you dry those out, they start to separate. They don't do it as much as that, obviously, but we lose product at a higher rate than other distilleries. So the common conventional wisdom, I should say, is in Scotland, they lose about 5% a year because it's cold and damp. So that cask is really tight, and it's, it's cold, so it's tighter, and it's sort of hunkered in, so to speak. In Kentucky, it's nice and warm, but it's still humid. So they've got liquid in the air that's on the outside of the cask, stopping those staves expanding. We're warm and dry, so we lose more. But we're losing the stuff that doesn't taste as good or doesn't have as good a flavor profile. as others. So after 3 years, we lose a lot. So Scotland will lose about 5% a year. Kentucky will probably lose about 8% a year. But in Santa Fe, we actually pump heat and humidity into our warehouse, or heat in the winter. We don't in the summer because it's 80 here every day. But we pump humidity in year round, and we still lose 12% minimum.
Wow.
So after 3 years, we've lost a third of it. But another odd fact that doesn't happen where it's drier is we actually lose as much water as we do alcohol. In Scotland, they'll lose alcohol, not the water. Now, this is a whole different science, and even above my pay grade. Water molecules are different from ethanol molecules, you know.
Wow.
So they're different and they act differently. But our proof can go up in a barrel. We can put it in at 122, and it can come out as 125.
Right. Right.
It just depends.
I actually understood that.
Oh, good. Yeah. Oh, good.
Oh, that was great. Wow. Incredible science.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. And one of my goals is to get away from day to day, you know, bits and pieces, and really get into the sciencey, nerdy side of it. I'd love to.
Yeah, that's a great goal. Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, this comes up this has come up a couple times, like, because, you have very much to do with your day to day. Are you ever able to take a day off, and how do you structure a day off? Like, what's your dream day off?
The dream day off. Actually, I had one on Wednesday. I went skiing.
Cool.
We have a ski basin near here, and I managed to sort of shove meetings to one side or the other, and we are at half capacity for our staff, but we're all covering for each other. And I think COVID, I think we've still got another year of realization as to what it's really done to people, not just the physical germ attacking you, but the mental stress of thinking I could be out of business, or my boss could be out of business generally. So we're taking mental time for ourselves. So Wednesday was a mental day for me. It wasn't like I was sort of losing it or anything.
Right.
But it was just a sort of, it reminds you how lucky you are to live in New Mexico with a ski basin half an hour up the hill.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great attitude. Absolutely. All right. So we agreed it would be great to talk about England a little bit.
Oh,
my mother's from the country, and you grew up there.
Yeah.
So let's say I'm finally going back to England after all this for a visit. Where do you recommend I go?
The English tourism industry would hate me. I would avoid London and the big towns. I think they've, for good reason, sort of homogenized a lot of the good stuff. Wow. I mean, everybody says, we're going to go to England. You can definitely go to London, do a royal tour. There's some great things to see. The Tower of London's incredible, all that kind of stuff. But it's sort of like going to New York, you go see the sights. Nobody goes upstate New York. We have a distributor there, and I've traveled in upstate New York, and it's gorgeous, some parts of it. There's some skunky areas too, but England's the same, I would recommend really giving it plenty of time, give it at least a couple of weeks. That's not easy for most people to get that much time. Mm. But with jet lag, you sort of definitely lose the first day. Mm. And, I think it's worth, driving on the wrong side of the road is kind of fun, like they do over there, learning about roundabouts, which they live by in England. English love roundabouts, but can't figure out a four-way stop. And it's vice versa here in America. They put some in this town. It's so
funny. My hometown just converted a four-way stop to a roundabout. I was like, a roundabout? I was like,
exactly. What are you doing? Yes. Yeah, so England is, it's interesting. I mean, having grown folks, they were school teachers, and they moved to different schools and stuff. But I grew up in the northeast of England. I think if you really want to see English people, they still do have a good pub scene. It is really decreased from what it was. Right, and it's not like just saying go to England and go out to the bars. Right. There is a lot more community around them.
Absolutely.
They have restaurants. I remember as a kid, you couldn't do this these days. You're a young kid, you get rowdy in a bar, and an old guy would come over and say, "Hey, you guys keep the noise down." Okay, yeah, and you listened, but different era as well.
Yeah.
But they sort of took. There was a bit of a respect that went on. You sort of learned how, and I think it helped. Alcohol has its issues. Definitely. I mean, we're in the business, and we're very cautious of it. Our tasting room downtown, we sort of try to design a bit more like a local pub. A lot of people walk there. We put it in a neighborhood.
Right.
Our bartenders are very friendly. They're not cute. They don't wear mini skirts. It's about the whiskey. It's not, and the cocktails. It's not about being out, and people appreciate it. No TVs.
Absolutely.
Anyway, it's different, but I think if you would go, England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales are still 4 very different places. I'd highly recommend Scotland, not because of their single malts. It's gorgeous. But it's like touring the US, if you go to New Orleans and you go to Seattle,
I haven't been yet.
You go to New York and you go to Florida, you've got 4 massively different places. Now, the climate's not necessarily that different. It's cold and damp in all of them in the British Isles, but England is classic and gorgeous rolling countryside. Ireland is as green as can be. And Ireland gets the weather that comes across the Atlantic first. So it's a bit more pagan in the people and in the way they have to live, because you avoid the weather a lot. Scotland is just up there, and it's up in the mountains. Wow. And Wales is another green, sort of roly-poly. When they talk to you, it seems like they're singing to you. People like Tom Jones, some of the best singers in the world, and everybody sings,
Yeah.
And the food's different and all. Yeah. Sorry.
No, that was great. If you have more, I should probably let you go on it. That was great.
But no, I'd rabbit on forever. I like going back to England, but I like going back for a couple of weeks to visit, see my mom, see my dad. Of course, I haven't done that it's actually been 2 years now. I was planning a trip that then, got shut down because of COVID, but we're being safe. They are different. It fascinates me, and I still can't quite put my finger on it. The English are a lot more, as a population, conservative, not necessarily in politics, and just the way they live.
Right.
My mum doesn't throw out any trash. She doesn't consider it recycling, but she has a bucket of foil that comes off the yogurt and the glass and the paper and the plastic, because whoever they are, told them to separate it out and give it. They don't really call it recycling. They just call it separating your trash.
Right.
So they wash their trash so that they can, and it gets recycled. So they're a lot more in touch with the ups and downs of what goes on here in America. We, throw it.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
And I don't say that to insult Americans. I consider myself more American,
No, but really, like I got to visit Scotland, and they have, a lumber industry,
Yeah.
but they seem to be incredibly food conscious. Not that areas of America are not, and also along with these crazy, the lumber industry, there's at least a process to try and grow new trees.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not perfect, but like we literally drove by like a hill of baby trees.
Yeah.
Like again, not perfect, but it's interesting to see how they handle that just in general. And and so second to last question I gotta ask, Prince Harry is in America now. How do you feel?
Oh gosh.
If you don't have any thoughts about it, it's fine.
No, I don't have a huge amount. I'm not a royalist necessarily, in that I think they should stay no matter what. It's fascinating being in America, and there's a reason I live here, because I don't think you can start business as well and I've started businesses all my life. This just happens to be the latest one in the last decade. But because of that conservatism, they're going to say, oh, well, the royal family should stay because they've always been there. And in England, that's a reason. in America, people look at you and say, "What do you mean?" Because they've always been there. We're going to keep it there.
Wow.
There's a reason. There's, you look at the age of a building written above of the door, and it was like built in 1105. Oh
Yeah.
my God, that's pretty old. Here in Santa Fe, and it's an old town. 50
Right.
years makes it historic. In
Right.
England, I've never lived in a house that was less than 100 years, and it wasn't historic. It was just old, So I like the royal family. I think they're very good. Everybody complains that the Queen's worth like 80 billion, and why should one person have that much wealth? But the amount of money they
Oh, shoot.
huge, but also the pomp and pageantry is sort of it's a bit like our Grammys or Academy Awards, something that
Right.
always happens, and it sort of takes you back to the movie industry is cool or the music industry is cool.
Yeah.
England has this extra layer,
Yeah.
It wouldn't fly in America because it doesn't make a lot of common sense. But as an English person, I grew up English. I've lived in America longer than I have in England. But you sort of get a warm feeling of the royal family's still there and the Queen's still going,
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Harry over here is part of the new shake everything up, I think Meghan and Harry are smart, upstanding citizens, no matter what people in England think. But
Right.
I think they just don't want to put up with, if you grew up with it, it seems like bullshit. To view it from a distance is like, it's kind of cute,
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, like the comparisons you made, because someone asked me about it, a family friend, asked me how I
Yeah.
felt because of my heritage, and
Yeah.
I just went, I don't know, it's like the Super Bowl, it's
Yes, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So uh you mentioned music. I'm glad you did. I was curious, like, because tasting whiskey in the past, I would like wind up hearing a song on the radio, or listen to an album of music. What do you listen to? Do you listen to music while you have a dram? Anything like that?
Typically if I'm drinking, well, it depends. If I'm drinking whiskey at work, which
Hmm.
it sounds weird, doesn't it? But it
Yeah,
is
yeah,
part
right.
of the job. I mean, tasting whiskey is just, we taste it because every Col Keegan's a blend of 15 casks and you have to pick them. That's actually work. I mean, you're not drinking. The little
Mm,
bit of tea that's left in the bottom of my cup here, 3
right.
drops is how much you need to determine a barrel's good or not.
Wow.
So that's tasting it. If I'm drinking it with people at the distillery, we
Mm.
typically just have more like folk music going on in the background. But I say
Cool.
it ranges from folk to my 80s alternative music.
Yeah, yeah.
I grew up in the 80s, and it's alternative music, 80s alternative, everything from, the Specials through to, I don't know,
Nice.
um,
You just made a
orchestral
lot of
music.
you made a lot of
Sorry.
my friends here in Connecticut very happy,
Oh, good.
referencing the
Okay,
specials.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
The
it's
specials is a
funny.
good one.
I've got a 30-year-old daughter, and she knows a lot more about English music than I do.
Mm,
You hear Beatles, and for me, it's just reminiscent of you. I heard that as a kid because my parents were listening to it. I
right,
was born in '65.
right.
In the '70s, the Beatles on the radio. I wasn't listening to music at 5. It was just there.
Yeah.
So, but at the tasting room downtown, we sort of do a bit of everything. It's more of a millennial group who drinks there, so the music's for them.
Hmm.
But to me, if I'm in the tasting room, if I go with friends, I don't even hear the music
Right.
because I'm chatting. You might have guessed I don't mind talking, but um, but if I'm sort of listening to the room and seeing is everybody happy, it's, I don't know, everything from I can't even think of the names of the bands because I didn't grow up with them. But
Yeah.
more music that's appropriate to millennials, not really up to date, but sort of 10 or so years old. But
Yeah.
really, really, if I drink whiskey, if I'm sitting with a sipper at the end of the night,
Right.
my music is listening to the birds in the apple orchard or the crackle of the fire, which it is at the moment. I mean, got the doors open now, but they'll get closed in a bit because it'll get down to freezing tonight. So I'll put the fire on, put my feet up. It's a Friday night. And I, of course, don't drink what we make. My buddies and I trade a lot of whiskey backwards and forwards.
Right.
And, I sent this, 10-year celebration to everybody who I know who makes single malts here in the US.
Right.
And they said, well, I'll trade you for our latest, greatest, and we'll talk about, the whiskey industry. And it's not just single malts, it's bourbon, it's rye. In the craft industry, we all play together so nicely because it's about the camaraderie. When it gets to be big business, they're a friendly bunch of guys, distributors and liquor salesmen, but they have to move pallets of whiskey, not bottles of whiskey. So they don't have the ease of sitting, sipping and talking about, okay, I'll buy a bottle.
Right.
They're talking to, Walmart about, come on, you need another case of another pallet or truckload of Jack Daniels. It's a different market,
I hear you. That was great. Excellent. All right. And so, last question. The writing on your website represents your unique perspective on whiskey, blending UK single malt with the smoky themes of the American Southwest. What are your future plans in terms of continuing your craft and producing new bottles?
It's interesting. I was talking about how we just sit around and talk about our craft and the distributors have to worry about numbers. We don't really plan on any real major shifts in products. We're not going to start making a bourbon. We're not going to start making a rye. Mm-hmm. What we are going to do is an aged whiskey, Silver Coyote, we talked about a long time ago. We're going to try aging that in casks. It's got no smoke. So it'll be really about the barley and the oak without the smoke in the middle. We are going to try aging out of the rick house, which is heated and humidified. Our angel share will go up, but maybe the flavor profile will change. We're going to lose more product. But if it's a different flavor, it'll be good. The single cask range, I'm surprised. I mean, it's $20 a bottle more how much we sell. We, for the business end of things, would love to try and make a more approachable whiskey, something we could get out the door, maybe at $39.99 at retail instead of $49. Well, actually, in other states, it ends up closer to $59. But that means you've got to be sort of committed to buy it, Right. I understand. I mean, with me and whiskey, it's sort of kind of work, So I spend on whiskey, but you won't find me trying new beers as much as I probably should, Yeah. It's funny,
Yeah, of course.
But we're going to look at expanding those. The way to get a cheaper whiskey out is really to sell a lot more volume. So that's back to the business end. It's like an unraveling ball of string. You pull on one end. We want to do a new product, and it means so many other things.
Yeah, I understand that definitely. Yeah, like you said, an 8-hour day, goes by like that. An email here, tasting there. All right.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's a great small business. I coach a lot of people on why to and why not to get into it, but talking to you is one of the fun parts. It's reminded me a lot of what I like about it, on a Friday afternoon.
That's so terrific to hear. I'm glad you had a good time. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I actually really appreciate that. Thanks a bunch.
Well, thank you for doing what you do. I love listening to podcasts and, just people's perspectives. We all spend a lot of time in the car these days, and I think podcasts are better than, getting angry at other drivers.
Yeah, it's probably I haven't thought about that. Probably settled out a lot of road rage.
Yeah.
And you're great to listen to. You'd be very welcome back, and we'll talk.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk tequila or something.
Yeah.
Let's see this orchard. How about it?
Oh yeah, let's see what we can do here.
All right.
This isn't a this might be pointing you direct into the sun, but this is out the west side here. Can you see anything at all?
Yeah, wow.
You can see over the back there's the trees in the background.
Oh, wow.
Over there. And that's the hillside behind. That's more New Mexico territory.
Gotcha.
So that's the west side. Now, if I'm lucky, I can get us out the east side here.
All right, cool. This is wild.
I'm
This
in
is
my
this is an action sequence for the
in
podcast.
my
I'll tell
gear
you that.
room. You asked what we do for fun. This is me packing to go rafting in a couple of weeks.
All right, good for you.
So I'm going to open this window here.
So rafting is sort of scaled 1 through 10 by difficulty. What's the highest number that you've done?
You know, I'm a newbie, so I don't even know the numbers. But I know we're going to the Grand Canyon, and there's some class 4s there. But we're going with it's a bunch of distillers going. So
You're going with a bunch of distillers?
Yeah, there's like 6 of us distillers. Can you see the orchard here?
Yeah, it's great.
So that's the little orchard and our sheds where we keep the tractor and stuff.
Uh-huh.
So that is us, and the fence there is the end of the property. It's not big, and it goes up the hill there.
Yeah.
But
how often do you have to prune the trees?
Once a year. I actually have a guy do it who knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I understand.
And he's very specialized in, I mean, some of those, as you might have seen, are sort of look like they're falling apart. They're sort of hollow in the middle. They've rotted. You know, a tree trunk will, one of the trunks will die. Wow. And it gets rotted through the middle. So a lot of them are sort of like shells on the outside. And we've got bands around them. But even at that, you know, some of them are like 2 inches thick in a circle that's about 18 inches round. But they can still produce 300-400 pounds of apples hanging on those branches. Makes me worried a little bit. There you go.
Yeah. All right. So you're in a time capsule episode. Is there anything you'd want to say to your future self?
Stop and appreciate every moment.
Ah, too good.
Stop and think. Don't just rush. And enjoy,
wow, you nailed it.
And enjoy good whiskey with it.
All right. You heard it here first, folks. Take a break. Have a dram. You did a great job. I don't even know what to say.
Well, thank you. Cheers.
All right. I'm actually gonna stop recording in a minute. But here, stay on the line with me. I just want to say a proper goodbye.
Okay. Happy to.
So thanks so much for watching, everyone. I I'm very pleased. If you like whiskey at all, this was a great tour. All right. See you next time.